Will Hezbollah launch an all-out war on Israel? The Lebanese armed group has exchanged fire with the Israeli military, but it stopped short of using the most powerful missiles in its arsenal. So what could happen if it launches a full offensive? This is Inside Story.
The personal possessions of people living in fear. Many are sheltering in schools like this after fleeing their homes in southern Lebanon. Fighting around the border with Israel has escalated since Hamas launched its assault on southern Israel on October the 7th. The conflict between the Palestinian group's ally and the Israeli army is raising fears of a wider war. That's as Israel is massing its forces for a possible ground invasion inside the Gaza Strip.
We are concerned and we are part of this battle. Let it be clear that whenever events unfold and something arises that requires our intervention to be greater, we will do so.
Hezbollah is seen as a significant force in Lebanon, wielding both political and military power. The Shia movement rallied public opinion against the Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon after being founded in the early 1980s. And despite Israel's withdrawal in 2000, Hezbollah has retained its strength with financial and military support from Iran. For Iran, the group is crucial for deterring any attack by Israel and exerting influence in Lebanon and the region. Hezbollah has highly skilled fighters. They helped Syrian President Bashar al-Assad during the country's civil war, and its arsenal is reported to contain Iranian precision-guided missiles. Israel considers Hezbollah its most formidable foe since both sides fought to a standstill in a 34-day-long war in 2006. And now, with the United States deploying 2 aircraft carriers and several warships to the eastern Mediterranean, the risk of an escalation in fighting in the region is growing. Victoria Gatenby for Inside Story.
Perhaps that Israel will make the first move, and then the blame could lie on the Israeli side.
Elijah, can I get your assessment?
Engage in fighting inside the territory controlled by Israel rather than defending itself in the Lebanese soil. That means for the first time in the history of Israel, the battle has been moved to the other territory and not happening on the territory that is under the attack of the Israeli army, because normally it's Israel that takes initiative to start a war. Fourthly, Hezbollah has engaged by mobilizing all its elite forces along the border, showing that they have evacuated all the training camps, all the military facilities. The Israeli army to rely on drones and on physical patrols, exposing them to Hezbollah laser-guided missiles and hitting so far more or less 40 Israelis between killed and wounded. By starting all this military operation, Hezbollah has drawn to itself 3 Israeli divisions, including special forces, to make sure that they are not going all to Gaza and they are engaged there, forcing the Israeli army to create 2 lines of defense on the borders with Lebanon. The war has started already, but it's in a different way.
OK, let me bring in Nicholas on that, because
some analysts who say that that really marked a turning point where Israel's qualitative military edge, we can see a steady decline vis-a-vis the military forces that Hezbollah has been able to build up, that they have developed through the war in Syria, whether you're for it or against it. They have extraordinary battle-hardened experience there. And to say that they look back at 2006 as a kind of something that where it cost a tremendous amount, indeed, it's quite the reverse. And Hezbollah leaders are actually very, let's say, buoyed by the experiences of 2006 and afterwards. In fact, they view that as having been a victory that lays the framework for what comes in what they call this next great war. If we're there right now, today, we are not at that moment, but I think all of us probably agree that the factors kind of that might spark this off or lead it to an acceleration into an even deeper conflict are all building up by the hour, unfortunately.
And they looked at the protest here in Israel in the last 6 or 9 months and took it to be a kind of a weakening of Israel, rather than seeing how vibrant the Israeli society is. So they're going to test us again, and I think they will be up to big surprises.
Elijah, I'd like to move on from 2000.
$1,837 children and 1,023 women. It requires a lot of effort, really, and a lot of bombs. Now, we move on by saying that Hezbollah understood that, and to compensate, it needs a long-range missiles. And if we look at the distance between Naqoura and Eilat, that is more or less 400 kilometers. That is, Hezbollah starts fighting and launching missiles from the borders, which is not going to be the case because Hezbollah has moved outside the residential areas to take away from Israel the excuse of bombing civilians, which is, I don't think is going to happen because the Israelis will bomb the villages anyway. So because of that, Hezbollah needs only 2 hours only, making so many hundreds soldiers as hostages or prisoners, including 4 generals. So because of that, and because the damage that is going to be inflicted on Israel, I think Israel needs to think twice before thinking, I'm going to start the fighting against Israel. And I think it is doing so because for the first time in the history of Israel, it has accepted to fight on a demarcation line. It is not exceeding a certain kilometer and distance imposed by Hezbollah, by a non-state actor against the most powerful army in the Middle East in just a few days. So the drone capability of Hezbollah.
Yes, some people in Israel, probably Gallant himself, believe that this is the right moment, and we shouldn't repeat the mistake we did with Hamas, that we let it grow and arm itself and become such a huge threat to Israel, and we should deal with it now, because later it will be even more difficult. I doubt it. As I said, Israel should keep Hezbollah at bay, and if dragged into war, as I said, the price Lebanon will pay will be dramatic.